Okay, I want to talk about this very rare book, Hebrew is Greek, by Joseph Yahuda. This is another piece of evidence that supports my mythological unification theory and that, the Greek gods are basically the same that is written about in the Bible and all of your Abrahamic religions and other mythologies. Now, this Jewish man, Joseph Yahuda, was a self taught linguist, a lawyer, and a freelance author. And he was born on July 29th, 1900, in Jerusalem, Israel. And he got very interested in this linguistics issue. And after doing a lot of studying, he published this book in 1982, Hebrew is Greek, Greek is Hebrew, in which he proposed the theory that the Hebrew and Arabic languages are Greek in origin. He claimed that virtually all Hebrew and Arabic words could be derived from Greek ones. And he died in 1995 in England. But the book is out of print, and as you can see from my screen capture, just to get a copy of this book, it's over $1,700 for a used hardcover one, and could go quite a bit higher. There's one being sold for over $10,000 on Amazon. But being the resourceful person that I am, I actually have found a copy of it online and have been trying to read it. Now, this book is over 700 pages, and I'm not a linguist, so I'm not an expert on what most of the book is him trying to show the two languages together and how it proves out his theory. But I want to read some of his first chapter, Hebrew and the Hebrews, and just give you an idea of what he was trying to say. I'm not going to copy all of the pages. I have the last 2 pages of the first chapter copied out for you on here. You could go online and try and look this up if you want to learn further, but let me read some of this. Greek and Hebrew have lived cheek by jowl since their existence as such. That is over 3,000 years ago, when they settled, one at the junction of Asia and Europe, and the other at that of Asia and Africa nearby. They have each made a major contribution to civilization, yet until the advent of Alexander, they seem to have influenced each other not at all, though there had been intercourse between them. Can it be, as I think, contrary to all accepted scholarship, that they are intimately related by race and religion as well as by language? Accounts differ as to the racial affinity of the people of Israel to other people of antiquity. According to all too brief geoethnical survey in the 10th chapter of Genesis, some of the tribes of Hellas descended from Japhet, the Philistines, and the Phoenicians, like the Hittites and the Amorites, descended from Ham, while the Hebrews and the Arabian clans derived from Shem. However, Ezekiel, however, asserts that the Israelites are a crossbreed of mixed Hittite and Amorite origin, which makes them descendants of Ham. Lastly, if the ignored epistle set out in the first book of Maccabees and in the Antiquities, the Jews must have descended from Japhet. Here it is in the context, followed by a translation. It says, at this time, Seleucus, who was called Philopator, the son of Antiochus the Greek, reigned over Asia. and Hyrenius' father Joseph died, his uncle Onias also died and left the high priesthood to his son Simon. And when he also died, Onias his son succeeded him in that dignity, to whom Arius, king of Lacedaemonius, sent an embassage with a letter and a copy, whereof follows. Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Onias, greeting. We have come upon a certain document from which we have discovered that both the Jews and Lacedaemonius are of one race and originate from the kindred of Abraham. It is but just, therefore, that you, who are our brethren, should send us messages about any of your concerns as you please. We will do the same to you and esteem your concerns as our own, and will look upon concerns as yours. Demetrius, who brings you this letter, we will bring you letter back. The writing is square, and the seal is an eagle holding fast a serpent. Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute. The writing is square, and the seal is an eagle holding fast a serpent. Boy, that sounds like a Mexican flag. Okay, let me continue. Such as adds Josephus with unwonted neutrality and dryness, were the contents of the letter which was sent by the king of the Lacedaemonians. As a matter of fact, it is difficult to find anywhere else in his works a note so bare, so non-committal, not to say indifferent, especially having regard to the novelty of the suggestion. One is therefore forced to the conclusion that although Josephus did not doubt the genuineness of the diplomatic letter, or he would not have reproduced it in extenso, he may have felt rather skeptical about the authenticity of the document referred to therein. But perhaps his priestly background and anti-Hellenic proclivity unconsciously prejudiced him against the apparently spontaneous Greek protestations of common ancestry with the Jews. To return to the Bible, when the first mention of Hebrews occurs in Genesis, where Abraham, when informed of Lot's capture to the sackers of Sodom, is described as a Hebrew. Now, were Abraham and his nephew the only Hebrews in the region at that time? It does not look like it for three reasons. First, Joseph refers to it about an uneventful century later as the land of the Hebrews. Secondly, both Potiphar's wife and Pharaoh's chief builder referred to Joseph as a Hebrew slave or youth in much the same way one imagines, as the Greeks used to refer to one of the familiar Phoenicians in their service as a Phoenician woman. Thirdly, the Egyptians would not eat at the same table with the Hebrews, including them in the taboo against the abominated shepherds. None of these references is consistent with the Hebrews being an isolated family of nomadic herdsmen roaming about the land of Canaan. Later, the word Hebrew in juxtaposition with aliens undoubtedly means the people of Israel without tribal specification. Thus, it is used to distinguish Israelites from Egyptians, Israelite citizens from the denizens in their midst, Israelites from Philistines, and clearly Israelites from other nationals. Clearly, therefore, one cannot depend on Jewish sources for a reliable account of the ethnic identity of the Hebrews. An investigation into their language, on the other hand, meets with an initial obstacle. The extraordinary fact that in ancient times it was not called after their name, as if they never existed as a distinct ethnic or national unit. Isaiah refers to it as the language of Canaan, while Reb Shakah, who spoke Aramite, called it Judean, as indeed Nehemiah to distinguish it from Ashdodite, a relic of the language originally spoken by the Philistines. But in Jeremiah, Judean and Hebrew are interchangeable terms. Besides, we do not know in what language or languages the patriarchs spoke to their various neighbors. Abraham in Egypt, or in the popular assembly of Hebron, Lot in Sodom, Isaac in the course of his transaction with the king of Gerar, Jacob in Genesis, he and his sons in the controversy with Hamor. Much later, the Israelite spies and Rahab seem to have understood each other perfectly well. One thing is certain, the Gibeonites, who were Hivitites, conversed with Joshua in a language which was spoken both totally or locally and in distant parts. Joseph. Okay, it is without significance that the Bible mentions the interposition of an interpreter on one occasion only when Joseph pretended to his brothers to be an Egyptian. In this connection, it is vital to identify, by my theory, the different people who inhabited Canaan at the time of Joshua, namely the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Perizzites, side of the Caphatorim, and the Philistines. These inhabitants were by no means exterminated, and their survival and ultimate assimilation must have influenced the Israelites in various ways, including lingually. It is a fact that Jebusites preserved their identity till the reign of David, while the semi-assimilated descendants of the Philistines continued to speak a distinct dialect to the time of the Second Temple. At the end of this quest, one is merely left under the impression that the language of the patriarchs must have been somewhat modified by reason of the contact of their descendants with the colonists of Canaan, as it must have altered slightly in the course of the Israelites' sojourn in Egypt. We still do not know by whom, other than the patriarchs, their language was spoken. There remains yet one more track to follow. The Hebrews are supposed to derive their name from Eber, whose numerous progeny is said to have settled in the region covering Syria, Mesopotamia, Eastern Asia Minor, and the Arabian Peninsula. Traditionally, however, the word is said to refer to Abraham's migration southwestward across the Euphrates. Your forefathers settled on the other side of the river from the old Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they worshipped other gods. This general reference to other gods, occupied with the specification of two of them, worshipped of these three patriarchs. Okay, let's see. Something together with, and then he says something in Hebrew. I can't read this. The sacred trappings associated with Laban's worship gives, through my philological research, a sure clue to the identity of the Hebrew race, as well as to essentially Hellenic character of its religion and language. For the written word is like a fossil of an artifact. Its form, if not its pronunciation, is fixed and permanent and lends itself to repeated scrutiny. So the philology can be handmaid of archaeology. I maintain that biblical Aramaic and Hebrew are demonstrably Greek in grammar as well as in vocabulary. True, distinct phonetic and morphological differences exist between almost all biblical words and their respective Greek homologues, but they are superficial and diaphanous. By contrast, the Hebrew homologues fully preserve their semantic identity with their Greek counterparts, notwithstanding the biblical Hebrew and the Greek developed apparently independently of each other during two eventful millennium. As for grammar, there are one or two minor similarities which are obvious, whereas several fundamental resemblances have gone unsuspected. If my theory be correct, it would be automatically followed that the sister languages, Arabic and Aramaic, are affiliated to Greek. Similarly, English and French, among other European tongues, must somehow be related to the Hebrew. In fact, my theory establishes precisely that. Thus, Latin and English and French are identical 2 by 2, and they are all easily traceable to Greek. Beyond cable, the segregation of the Semitic form of, Semitic from the Indo-European languages flies in the face of the philological facts and principles which I am about to prove. Indeed, it will emerge that just as knowledgeable of Greek is essential knowledge of Greek is essential to the thorough understanding of the Bible. A better understanding of Greek would be achieved through knowledge of Arabic and Hebrew. Admittedly, the logical conclusions of my philological theory, geographical, historical, racial, religious, and social, as far-reaching as revolutionary indeed, yet their apparent strangeness is due to generations of neglect and prejudice and should not deter scholars from apprehending the perceptible reality which sparkles in the brilliant light shed by my conclusive demonstration. It is positively astonishing that no one has hitherto suspected the identity of these two languages, a fact which raises a strong presumption against the soundness of my theory, especially as a common alphabet apart. There have been, in the course of the past 23 centuries, many a favorable opportunity for discovering any resemblance which might exist between them. That is to say, 1. Over 2,000 years ago, Jewish scholars translated the scriptures into Greek, producing the Septuagint, which has remained unchallenged as an authentic source of biblical exegesis. About that time, as we have seen, the Spartans claimed kinship with the Jews. 3. Jews played a leading part in the development of the Hellenistic culture in Alexandria. 4. In the last 2 centuries of the Jewish state, many well-born and educated Jews affected Hellenism and tried to spread the Greek way of life among their countrymen. 5. Josephus wrote his autobiography, The Tract Against Apion, the Jewish War, and the Antiquities in Greek, as well as in Aramaic or Hebrew, the Greek versions being the only ones extant. 6. The apostles who introduced the Messianic Creed into Greece and the Asiatic Greek or continental settlements discussed the Pentateuch and the prophets in Greek, provoking widespread interest in the scriptures among the Greeks. 7. A large number of Talmudic words were borrowed from Greek, and many of them have kept their original form and exotic flavor, rendering obvious the existence of a mixture of amalgams. 8. Jewish scholars have learned Greek in order to gain direct access to the Septuagint and the works of Josephus, and the better to understand the Talmud. 9. Jewish scholars well versed in Hebrew unheralded in the Renaissance by translating the Greek classics into Arabic. 10. At the time, Muslim scholars whose mother tongue was Arabic studied Greek. 11. Since then, countless classical scholars of all nationalities have spent all of their academic lives at the universities of Europe and America in the study of Arabic and Hebrew. 12. Homer and the New Testament have been translated into Arabic and Hebrew. None of these thousands upon tens of thousands of learned men in different climes and succeeding ages has ever ventured to suggest that these 3 languages are genetically interrelated, let alone that Hebrew is identical with Greek. There were those who, like W. Moose Arnold, discovered a limited number of Greek words with Semitic affinity and promptly classed them as borrowed. This is different to the time-hallowed dogma, which has erected a barrier, not less forbidding, because bogus, between the Semitic and the Aryan languages. At the opposite pole stood Reverend John Packhurst, author of an Hebrew and English lexicon without points. He lived 200 years ago and supported the untenable rabbinical theory that Hebrew was the lingua primitiva, the mother of all tongues, including Greek. Sheikh Muhammad Amin Mazhar, a scholar in the Ahmadiyya sect, on the other hand, contends that all languages, including Chinese and Greek, derive from Arabic, the language of the Quran. There exists a third school which has attempted to build a bridge between the Kemeto-Semitic and Indo-European languages. One of the foremost exponents being A. Cunny, author of Invitation à l'Aptitude Comparative des Languages Indo-Europeanes et des Langues Comitae Semiticus, Lastly, Professor Cyrus H. Gordon, a scholar of broad vision and deep understanding, holds that Hebrew and the Hellenic cultures were twins. On going to print, I learned that Professor Saul Levin at Harper College, State University of New York, Binghamton, New York, author of the Indo-European and Semitic Languages, an exploration of structural similarities related to accent, chiefly in Greek, Sanskrit, and Hebrew. And then on page 8 he writes, many things still puzzled me, above all, why were the correspondences closer between Greek and Hebrew than between any other Indo-European and Semitic languages? Just because I knew these better, slowly I discovered that in many respects, Sanskrit, rather than Greek, affords the more cogent parallel to Hebrew. Okay, so the guy continues. I'm going to stop. Guy continues on, and he talks a little bit more about what his conclusions are. And so I'm going to read the last part of this. It says, my research over 30 years has been conducted independently of others. Starting from scratch, I have consistently investigated the language of the Bible and the language of the Bible with the assistance of Arabic and the Septuagint. I've worked autonomously throughout, fashioning and refashioning my own laws as I went along. In the result, I have been led to irresistibly to the following conclusions. 1. That about 4,000 years ago, the whole of the Middle East was overrun, colonized, and controlled by Greek and allied tribes. 2. That the Hebrews were Asiatic Greeks, probably the Kabaru and Heparu of Syrian and Egyptian annals, and that their language was continental Greek. 3. That judging by the proportion of epic and poetic homologues and by the primitive grammatical structures to be found in the Bible, one is impelled to the conclusion that the ancestors of the Jews must have been the noblest and or the most ancient of the Hellenes, and that they spoke a language far more ancient than classical Greek. 4. That the Philistines were colonists continuously flowing in from the mainland of Greece, and that the adjoining islands who settled on the southern shore of Canaan. The Asiatic, and then he's got something here in Greek, and were consequently called something, a distinct from the, I can't read this, he's got different languages. Okay, 5, that when Hellenic affinity of the Phoenicians had long been forgotten, it was assumed that the identity of the Greek with the Phoenician alphabet was simply a matter of borrowing. 6, that the inhabitants of Iraq are mainly of Scythian and Cimmerian origin. 7, that the Helots were Israelites. 8, that the Hebrews worshipped Greek gods and followed Greek customs. 9, okay, wait, I'm backing up a minute. Did you just hear what I just said on 8? That the Hebrews worshipped Greek gods and followed Greek customs. 9, that Hebrew has a multiplicity of unsuspected dialects and homonyms. 10, that many proper nouns in the Bible, whether divine, ethnic, geographical, or personal, resemble Greek proper nouns, while others have Greek adjectives and common nouns and homologues. 11, that certain Greek words pronounced by continental Greeks differently from their European brethren found their way back to Greek in the spelling conforming to their continental pronunciations. I call them atavisms. 12, that certain non-biblical words found in rabbinical writings can be proved to have been used in biblical times. 13, that the Ashkenazi and Yemenite pronunciations, like the Baghdadi and the Sephardi, are as old and as genuine as Greek itself. 14, that Judean and Ashdodite were not more different one from the other than Hebrew is from Arabic or Aramaic. 15, that only by my theory it is possible to establish securely the true meaning of obscure biblical words and the right interpretation of puzzling passages. 16, that only through the knowledge of Hebrew and Arabic is it possible to attain a finer understanding of Greek. 17, that the Jewish, the Christo-European, and the Islamic cultures, the triple aspect of modern civilization, all originate from Hellas. Okay, I'm going to stop. So, what this guy is just confirming through his study of linguistics, and he does over 700 pages of comparing Hebrew to Greek, is he's telling you that the Greeks came from, or that the Jews came from the Greeks. As I've told you, they've come from the Argive Dynasty per some of my readings out of that Loeb library, linking them back to this Argive Dynasty, and that they their gods God is the same as the Greek gods or God, and their main god is Jupiter Sabazios, and that would be Zeus. So this Greek or this Jewish guy who spent 30 years studying language has come to the same conclusion about them being the same people as the Greeks, or coming from the Greeks. As I've told you, they've come from the Argive Dynasty. And so this is just another piece that supports my theory as well. That's it. Thank you.